Hi, I'm Damon Weigel, and I chose the topic of ensuring healthy development for all youth as my grand challenge to social work. I did so with a focus on community schooling and high school graduation rates. This topic is important to me on a professional level as I'm a clinical caseworker in a youth group home, and then on a personal level as my volunteer work. I've spent much of the last 12 years in Colombia developing rugby programs and working on other social projects. This topic is important to the field of social workers because as social workers, we work underneath the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics and core values, one of which being pursuit of social justice, particularly with and on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed individuals and groups. There's an inherent vulnerability with being a child. We recognize this in society with the Child and Family Service Acts, Child Protective Services, as well as a multitude of agencies across the world focused on child and youth development. This goal brings a strength-based perspective as opposed to the historic focus on deficits by social work in this area. There are also social determinants to healthy development in youth. Therefore, this is an area of needed focus when pursuing social justice. The impacts in my community where high school graduation rates in Canada fluctuate greatly between communities and other socioeconomic factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, poverty, and location. 1 in 10 Aboriginal people in Canada live in my home province of Saskatchewan. They compile 16% of the province's total population, more than half of which, 54%, are under the age of 25. Compare this with 30% non-Aboriginal people in the province. In my selected community of Regina's North Central, 37% of the residents declare as Indigenous Canadians. Statistics from the Ministry of Education say that in Saskatchewan in 2008, the overall graduation rate of grade 12 graduation 3 years after starting grade 10 was 72.3%. Compare this in the same area for Indigenous people, that marker was 32.7%. I began my community assessment project by identifying a community. I then went on to identify agencies in that community that are currently focused on youth development. I went to 1 community high school, 2 community elementary schools, a community association, a subsidized daycare, and a youth center. After identifying the organization, I continued researching fundamental documents and collecting data. Then I identified individuals in the organizations to send their recruitment letters and book interviews. Once the interviews were booked, here's a sample of my questions that I used. Lastly, after the interviews, I organized data, summarized my findings, and created the presentation. Some of my findings were that every organization seemed to be focused on the basic needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, securing safety and physiological needs. Schools had breakfast and lunch programs. The Rainbow Youth Center had open gyms and evening activities, providing safe place for the youth in the community. The North Central Community Association is involved in community activities, emergency food programs, as well as community policing. There's been a shift on focus in the education. There's much more land-based education. Cree language classes are readily available, and elders are involved in teaching. The community is also heavily involved and has a strong voice in the school. Out with the old. There's been a lot of money brought into the neighborhood in the last decade, a lot of funding. Both Sacred Heart and Connaught Community School were demolished and rebuilt. This was interesting to me as I went to Connaught School in the 80s, and to see the new school was exciting. Scott Community High School was also demolished and moved into a multi-purpose Mamawayetahan Center. This is the Cree word for let's all be together. The center houses Scott Community High School, North Central Community Association, Regina Public Library Branch, North Central Community Policing, Recreational Complex, Prairie Lily Subsidized Daycare, as well as an elders room. My recommendations for working in this area in the future are to build on those foundations of physiological and safety needs. Be creative when looking for funding. Create community schools, involve the community in every aspect of schooling, and recognize the culture. Schools should become person-centered, focused on the strength and skills of the individual student as well as their interest. Thank you for listening to my presentation.